Yeah, it's just preparing to live stream. We are now live.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. In case you haven't realised, Councillor Dugan is not going to be with us this evening. He is on his way to Scotland for a family illness emergency. He phoned me about just over an hour ago to let me know he wouldn't be here. And hence, I will count that as the first apology for absence. Do we have anybody else that has apologised for not coming?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no further apologies.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting. Has everybody read those, and can we accept that those are a true record of the meeting? Yes. Thank you very much. Anybody object to that? No? Good. Next, declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration about what we're going to be speaking this evening? No? Fantastic. We'll see England after all. Next item, information security policy. Over to someone. Louise.
Apologies, Chair, I couldn't get myself off mute. So this is the information security policy that I'm presenting to you this evening. We bring this policy on an annual basis because it is around our IT and network systems, and it's to ensure that we keep ourselves current and up to date. And this is a policy that is for our staff members, and the report is before you. It has already been to joint staff, and there were some questions raised at joint staff. One of those areas was around password and encryption. So we're just doing some work around that at the moment. But I just wanted to confirm back to this committee, as it was a question that was raised at joint staff, that the reason we have the 90-day changeover for password is to do with the public sector network rules, and it's just making sure that you're aware that is why we have that rule in place. And it's then now just to really pass back to you, Chair, and ask if there are any questions that the committee have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the policy? No? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I just wondered how often people needed to attend training. Was it a one-off? I see that training and awareness is mandatory. And I just wondered if that was a one-off thing at the point they joined it, how often we look for them to refresh their training, and how that's delivered, please.
Through you, Chair. So just coming back on that item, with regards to this policy, we send it out as an annual reminder. So when this update goes through, it's sent as an annual reminder. With regards to the training that is undertaken, anything where there is new software that is being used or something has changed, we will always bring it to our staff's attention, and we will always hold appropriate training sessions to ensure that, as I say, they are fully aware of all the different rules and regulations with regarding our IT systems.
You want to come back, Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, please. I think in a lot of organisations, actually a refresher data protection training is mandatory on an annual basis. And I wonder if maybe this is something that we should look to either introduce or to review, even if we decide to do it on a biannual basis. But sorry, Louise, are you saying that you do that, or is it just a one-off when things change?
That's my mistake. I haven't made that clear enough to you. Yes, we do it through an e-learning package. So it's something that we have sometimes what I call a classroom-based training, sometimes every 3 years, and then that is topped up with e-learning every year, and that is mandatory. Sorry, apologies for not understanding the question.
Could the wording then of the policy please be amended on that point 3 to say that staff attend scheduled training courses on an annual basis to ensure that they understand, or, you know, no less frequency than on an annual basis, so that it is clear?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to
Thank
do
you.
that, Chair, if that's something that you'd like me to do, no problem.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? With that amendment, then, can we agree to that this motion is, or this item is approved? Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Next item, data protection policy. Is that you again, Louise?
I'm afraid it's going to be quite a lot of me. Yeah, apologies for that this evening. So again, just to go through the policy, I will say that our information governance manager did do the update regarding this policy. So she is our lead around GDPR and data protection. So it's just sort of making sure that that is understood. I hope you can clearly see all the updates. We are now making sure we track any changes with regard to policies. Specific areas and changes within this policy also include consent, and there's a whole piece now being included about consent, and also data protection impact assessments. So again, it's ensuring that everybody has understood the rules with regard to the requirements around that. Again, just to confirm and just back with the e-learning, and we do make reference to it in this document, but as I say, that needs to be referenced into the previous document as well. And it's part of our induction policy that people mandatorily go through this particular policy. There were no other questions to raise. It does state, actually, sorry, there's one thing I just wanted to bring to your attention on 10.2, which was just about separate training for members, and that we were just asked to be a bit more explicit about that training. So that will be added into the policy.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions apart from Councillor Wheeler? No?
Sorry, spot the woman that loves policies and process, Councillor Betton, sorry about that. We make a bold statement that we ensure that any subcontractor, I'm just going trying to find it, 1.5, if any Surrey Heath Borough Council work is outsourced, that we ensure that the company complies with the same standards as would be expected if completed by SHBC. Could you please explain how we ensure that, or is that just a statement? So what proactive actions do we take to ensure that any organisation agrees to adhere to this?
I would say that actually that's an aspiration, and it's something that came up as part of our joint staff meeting. It has been added in, and perhaps we just need to look at the wording of that, councillor, because where we can, we absolutely in our contracts want to make sure that that is something that they are measured to with regard to GDPR. And we will always look to ensure that that is the case. And perhaps we just need to look at that wording, but it is something that was added as a result of the Joint Staff Consultative Committee.
So my view is that we can't approve this policy until the wording is correct as a committee, because if it's aspirational, but it's making a definite statement, then I don't think we're in a position to approve it at this stage, would be my view. So I think we either have to work on wording that is correct, or we have to have this one come back. I don't know what the rest of the committee feels on that.
I wondered whether the committee would consider delegating that responsibility to me to actually look at the wording and then report that wording back to you before we then publish it as a finalised document.
I see lots of nodding heads. Does anybody disagree with that idea? No?
I don't disagree with it, just so long as it comes back before it's approved or published, that's all. So I don't think we can have this one down as having been approved.
Well, it might be perhaps by the time the minutes get written.
Yes.
But it would need to come back, wouldn't it, for confirmation?
I can do that via an email, Chair, if that is in acceptance, if you're in acceptance with that.
Yeah, that's
So perhaps it's approved subject to that change, and that me getting that confirmation back from the committee.
Okay. Yeah, everybody happy with that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Now we are records management policy. Page 61.
So back to me, I'm afraid, Chair. This is a new policy that has just been introduced. So that's why you won't see any track changes on this particular policy. A couple of things that came up as part of joint staff, just to mention, which we are doing as a side to this policy, is it was just brought up around the historic data that we have with regard to our archive data, and just looking at our record keeping just from that point of view. So what I don't mean our normal general day-to-day records. This is something that came up through the curator of the museum, and it was just talking about the records that we hold, like, for example, different maps, etc., through the years, and it was just sort of making sure that there was a reference back into this document. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we were going to look at this particular item. Other than that, this is just really back to the committee to ask if there's any further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, I am sorry, everybody. It actually just relates to the information that relates to emails. I think, as everybody knows, I have a problem with some of the controls around email, but actually as members, we don't have access to any form of secure area, and we can't back up our iPads on iTunes, or, you know, on you know what I mean?
Yep.
So actually we do need access to a secure area in order to be able to securely store documentation, particularly if the guidance in here says that it shouldn't be stored on emails, which it does. So I just wondered what kind of timescales that could be introduced, how quickly that could be introduced, and also when and how. It's certainly something that has worried me for some time, and I think that this whole historical data thing brings that forward and gives an opportunity to discuss it again.
Again, if I can come back, Chair, if
that's
okay. So obviously with regard to this particular policy, it's very specific to staff, and it's about the staff management. But I do take on board and appreciate the point you make with regard to councillors and with regard to where you store your information. And I think it is perhaps a conversation that needs to be had, but perhaps it's separate to this particular policy. But again, I ask the committee if they're in agreement with that, but obviously picking that up through my role with ICT to actually look at that and come back to the committee, or again, appropriately report that back to those that have the query. I'm
sorry to be so anally retentive, but actually this doesn't say within it that it relates only to staff. It's a policy for the council, records management policy, unless I've missed it, for which I apologise. So I can't see here anywhere it's talking about records of the council. It's not talking about employees of the council's records. And actually, again, that's quite, I would have thought, quite an important legal point, in that actually the records that we have, some of those pertain to council. So this isn't clear in this document at all for me. Sorry.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I've always assumed that as a councillor, my records are my records. They're not the council's records, they're my records. And they may relate to things which I carry out as a councillor, but that does not define it necessarily as council records. They are a function of the job that I'm carrying out. Well, it's not a job actually, is it really? It's an elected role. We're not employed. And so I've always assumed that it is our own responsibility to take responsibility for our own data, for our own records, and to manage them in compliance with GDPR. Certainly what I do, I actually use a product called, software product called VeraCrypt, which provides an encrypted container location in which all of my documents, sensitive documents, are stored. And I make myself responsible for backing them up in the appropriate manner. So no, I agree that the records management document that we're asked to approve this evening, I would say very much relates to the council's records, not to ours at all.
Thank you. Councillor Bates.
Yes, I'm afraid I think it does relate to our records because we are agents of the council. So certainly my understanding, well, we are. So the issue, let's say if there's data protection, sorry, let's say there's a freedom of information request, then can people ask for councillor records? Yes, they can. Absolutely, they can. Similarly, if there was some kind of investigation that needs to take place, can the investigator, under certain circumstances, or the fraud, can they look at councillor records? Absolutely, they can. So the idea that the councillors are not, or in some way separate, is not actually accurate. Now, don't get me wrong, I do agree with Councillor Tappert, it's important for councillors to accurately keep records. I used to be registered with the Data Commissioner, particularly for that reason, but councillors were exempted quite recently for that. And I remember paying an annual fee for that purpose, but now we don't, or we don't have to unless there's some other reason that we keep data, which some of us may do for party political reasons or whatever. But for a councillor, certainly my understanding, Mr. Ramtahol is on the call, so he's very welcome to correct me, but I've always understood that in fact we are agents of the council and therefore our records are accessible and are not different to employees, although the policies might be. So I think that's the point which might differ, but certainly we are, our information, our records stored on our system, on council computers, is accessible under the council systems. Perhaps I could be corrected.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything to add? So what do we need to do about this?
With regard to this policy, Chair, just as Councillor has said, this is for staff, and we probably do need to pick up the item around councillors. I don't know whether Gavin Ramtahol wants to come in just with regards to that question, just to give some clarity, but perhaps it's something we need to discuss as a separate item at some point.
Thank you. Mr. Ramtahol.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Rodney is correct. The councillors' emails, email correspondence, and councillor businesses, they are council records. They would be disclosable under FOI, and it's part of the reason why we are clear that the councillors must use their councillor email address, and that is also in policy, so that there's a clear audit trail of the business that councillors undertake. So yeah, so just to be clear, the records are council business and they're retained for that reason.
Chairman, if I could just add to what our monitoring officer has confirmed. So paragraph 7.7 of the policy says all staff, elected members, contractors, consultants and agents are responsible for managing records in accordance with this policy. So there is certainly a clear role for members in relation to this.
Thank you. It's quite clear. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I was going to say we can't, because we don't have access to anywhere to store records other than on our iPad. So we, as members, fail at the very first point. So either the policy has to wait until we've got access in somewhere on a safe shared drive to share records, or it's got to be amended. But as it flies at the moment, it's asking us to do something which isn't possible for us to do.
Councillor Tapper.
Yeah, I think the problem we have here is that we are dealing with members of the public. And members of the public will contact us and discuss things with us in the way that they are comfortable of doing. So it will be things like Facebook, it will be things like Messenger, various chats. We may even discuss things with them over video chats and things like that. None of that is going to be able to be kept as records in accordance with this policy. So I think this policy, therefore, needs to be completely reviewed in the light of not just email, not just physical documents that may be passed to us by members of the public, but all means of communication that the public may choose to use with us, and that we cannot refuse to engage with them on that basis.
Good point. Councillor Bates again.
Yeah, just to be clear, when we're talking about, let's say, a Zoom call with residents, which I know people have, that there isn't a record kept of that unless you record it. So that is when it becomes FOIable. So the fact of it's the same as if you have a phone call with somebody, that is then not FOIable because there's no record of it. So it does depend on whether you keep it. Now, the other point, which I think we probably just need to be clear, is that yes, we are given a council iPad, which is for council business. Now, I don't know about what everyone else does, and perhaps this is something we're going to come onto social media in a moment, but my own view is I don't use Facebook on my council iPad because I have a personal Facebook. Some people contact me, but that's not my primary way of being contacted. So that's just me. I appreciate others might do differently and feel that you do actually do a lot. I know a number of people do actually, to be fair, have kind of Facebook blogs and things like that and pages. So you might consider that to be in your council capacity, or you might consider it in a political capacity. If it's a political capacity, party political, you shouldn't be using a council iPad because that's not what you've got. You've got to use your own computers for that. So there probably does need to be some more thought around it because we probably are not entirely clear as members, actually, just around that. But I mean, it might be we come onto it in a minute, but maybe we need to look at the IT policy for members as well, just to be clear, so that everyone is sure what we are allowed to do.
Thank you. I'm getting a sense that basically we might need to revisit this policy if taking into account all of the issues that have been brought up. Is that okay?
If they could, just to come back, Chair, with regards to, so you'd like to defer the agreement of this particular policy. Obviously, just with regards to our staff, it's just sort of making sure, obviously, we've got a clear record. So we will look at this quite quickly and look to try and turn it round. But I also think we probably need to have a separate conversation and probably through maybe, I don't know whether it would be more appropriate through the governance working group with regards to then members and then making sure the IT piece is covered off and that perhaps we need to look at that as a separate item and that is raised and clarification is then clearly given so that when we come forward with this policy, all areas have been covered off. So we're saying at the moment we'll defer this report pending then those further discussions. Is that what you're asking me to do?
I think so, yes. Everybody else agree with that? Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, so shall we move on to the social networking policy? It's a bit of a segue there.
Yeah, so we do try and, as I say, group these policies together just where they've obviously overlap and each policy speaks to itself. So social networking, again, this is guidance for staff and we have then made updates to the social networking policy. Again, this changes very quickly. Obviously, social networking in its very nature is continually changing. We have added in here with regards to, again, references and again, through track changes through the virtual meeting systems that we're now using. So Zoom and Teams. Again, just a point that was made at joint staff was just around using the right terms and making sure that it's a some of them are collaboration tools. So again, you know, we've looked to add that in to the policy. But 7.8, you will see quite a lot of change, and that is very specifically where we've increased our use of video conferencing. And again, this is looking at how it applies to staff. And the only other effort, thing just to make you aware of is that we needed to make sure that it was the speak up policy that it was made reference to as well. So if there's any questions again around social media, the social media policy, again, I'm happy to try and take those.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions on the updated policy? No. I think that's got the nod. Which takes us on to the National Graduate Development Programme. Who's dealing with this one? Is
Sorry, it's me again.
No, don't apologise.
We'd like to, we've brought this item to Joint Staff initially and now onto the Employment Committee. And it's to make a request to Council to create a new post of a graduate trainee through the local government association scheme that we have in place. The scheme has been sort of documented within the report, and also we have laid out what the costs of the scheme would be. And again, what we wanted just to be transparent about is if we wanted to find out if the committee were in agreement for us to make an increase to the budget so that we could take on a graduate through this scheme. Now, it does not guarantee employment at the end of the scheme. It's about having, as I say, a graduate opportunity for people to learn about local government with a view that hopefully that will then position them into the job market and into local government. And obviously through our networks, we would look to, wherever possible, look at finding suitable roles for them once they've come to the end of this scheme. And we would like to know whether the committee are in agreement with us putting this in place. Again, happy to take questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. I thought we had a graduate scheme already within the council, or has that lapsed, or is it a totally different scheme?
If I can just come back, Chair, just to explain. So yes, we do have what we call our intern summer programme, and that's where we take graduates on over the summer on holiday periods, and it's just for that period of time. So they're only with us for a very short period, whereas this is for a 2-year period. So it's actually a full graduate programme that they will be going through. So it's to complement really the schemes, and it will also further complement as well. We have apprenticeship schemes as well. So we're just looking at a range of different ways of bringing people at different levels into the organisation.
Can I just come back on that, Mr. Chairman? The graduate programme that we currently have, do any people return the following year and come back on? You know, sort of if the the following year of the university or something, do they sort of during the holidays come back into the council?
Again, to come back through you, Chair, just to sort of say, yes, they can do, and they have to apply for that, because we do go through an application process. And what we're trying to do for our graduates, and a lot of them is for local graduates, is actually to give them that experience of applying for a role, going through a recruitment process, and then actually experiencing, obviously the successful ones experiencing work. Now, if they have been successful in that first placement, then yes, we have taken them on to do further work for us. And as I say, that's usually a discrete piece of work, or as I say, they come back at another holiday period.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I just wanted to put a pathway mapping we've done in terms of the graduate or graduates. I'm actually surprised that we're limiting it to only one. I would have thought that there is a huge amount of cost benefit in actually taking in 2 or 3. And very often where I've seen this work successfully, they will come in on like an IT graduate scheme, And that can branch off into moving into a customer services IT type role rather than a hardware role, or a customer services role that can branch out onto an HR role, but actually that those career pathways are quite clearly marked from the start, so that people can almost on a box by box basis work their way through the council, increasing their own skills and actually bringing the benefit of new and bright ideas to that. So I just wondered what mapping there is in the background in order to ensure that this, I think it's a great idea. I just would like to see some detail about it, really.
Yep, I can provide you, sorry, Chair, if it's okay, just to come back. Just with regards to this, we will look to map, because again, what will happen is the graduates will have specific interests when they first join us. But the idea is to give them experience in a number of different areas, so that again that they get that variation. Now, I do appreciate we also need to do some further work around how successful that is within different areas, and we also agree that perhaps having more than one would be beneficial. But again, just with the cost implications in the first instance and the fact that we haven't had this scheme in place, we were looking to start with one initially, and perhaps we will come back to the committee if it's agreed to then look at whether or not we further the scheme and keep the continuation of the scheme. I also know that a local authority that has done this in Surrey have had that success and have had people at different stages within, as you say, that graduate scheme. So they come in year one, and then you've got some at year two. So again, they can learn from each other as well. And again, that can be very useful as part of the system. I don't know if I've answered your question, Councillor Wheeler.
I think to some extent, yeah. I think what's quite important though is that the graduates we take on fulfill the needs that we have within the council, as well as their personal interest needs. And actually, unless we've got a very clear development pathway, we may well be recruiting somebody who's got a great interest, for example, in planning, but we would have nothing for them to do in planning. So, you know, I think what would be certainly at the start of the programme, it is much more likely to be successful if there are definite defined objectives that they can be measured against, and there are definite pathways that they can potentially follow. And actually, I would urge this committee to suggest that we take on at least 2 at once. I believe the ideal number is 3, because we will lose some along the way, and actually look at points whereby it's measurable. They need mentors, they need objectives to achieve, they need projects to complete that they can be marked against, so that actually, rather than just coming in and sort of, you know, doing jobs here and there, we actually are progressing them correctly. So I would say that we need the objectives of what we're looking for first, in terms of where we're going to get the best results. And before we even begin to look at the graduate scheme. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's brilliant. I think there's a huge amount of benefit that we can get from getting people in that have not been browbeaten by working in other industries. But I think that we need to have the correct pathways for them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments to make? Just to throw my own 2 pennies in, we have employed this in my own company. It's a very good way of looking at people. Unlike what Victoria was suggesting, we don't have a planned pathway. That doesn't mean they can't go anywhere. One of them is actually now a director. Came in as a temp to do some filing. So depends on how you use it, but it is a good scheme, I think. The more the merrier, but therefore the council's benefit. It's not free training for them.
Chairman, could I just add to your comments and Councillor Wheeler's comments as well?
Please do.
So I don't know whether this is an advert for the graduate programme or whether it will put you off, but my start in local government was part of a graduate trainee programme, so I was a trainee. And I think Councillor Wheeler is absolutely right. It's really important that there is a clear pathway with the opportunity to develop real skills, both academically and practically, and to be clear from the outset about where the opportunities are, so that we're able to match the aspirations and indeed some of the latent talent with the opportunities that we have. There's no guarantee at the end of 2 years that they will get a job, but our experience is that most graduates do. And I think Councillor Weed is exactly right that we can't expect to hold on to all of them. But what I very much hope is that we hang on to them long enough so that they add real value to the organisation, bring fresh perspective and skills. And if we lose them to other parts of local government, what I hope is that one day we might attract them back into more senior roles when they've developed experience elsewhere. And in fact, the council that I was a trainee in, I did eventually leave, and they did eventually attract me back. And so it certainly worked out well for them. Thank you.
Andrew. Councillor Galliford. Oh, sorry, a yellow hand popped up. Councillor McClafferty.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not hearing any negatives from the kind of half suggestion that perhaps it should be more than 1, 2, or even 3. And I also didn't detect any negatives against we should be looking for a program where we, let's say 3, we bring in 3 per year. And so we have a rolling group coming through. I have similar stories to you, Chair, that, you know, bringing people in at a level, training them, they've turned out to be some of the best staff we have. I've got no reason, despite Mr. Roberts' story there, I've got no reason to believe that we wouldn't get good people. Yeah. I don't know if it's appropriate in this meeting or not, but I would like to find some way where, if the committee are in agreement, that we not only endorse this but ask Ms. Livingston and Mr. Roberts to look at it again with a view to saying, why don't we try and expand our ambition? If this is such a good thing, and I believe it is, why don't we look at 2 or 3? And why don't we at least have the plan that if year 1 works the way we're hoping, we would come back to the committee with a year 2 looking to do the same again and create a rolling programme within the organisation.
Thank you. I think that's a very, very good idea. You ought to be leader of, oh, you are, I think, leader of the council. Does anybody disagree with that? No. So Louise, can we come back or revise and?
Yep, so if you're in agreement then, Chair, and what you're asking is in fact that we agree to this scheme, but look to increase it by more than 1, perhaps looking at 2 in the first year, but make sure that then that becomes a rolling programme that we report back to you. I think it was 2 or 3, I should just add. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
If I may, I'm not sure why 3 suddenly got downgraded to 2 there.
Sorry, that was my mistake. It was my mistake. I apologise.
Right. Well, you know, there's a lot of numbers flying around, 2 and 3. You know, so you know, I think the committee, the chair asked, does anyone have a problem with what I suggested? I suggested 3. I agree that that's a lot more work, Mrs. Livingston. I know it is, right? But I do think I have a lot of faith in this program. I know the kind of quality it can deliver for the organisation. So I would suggest we start with a target of 3, but if you only end up being able to attract 2 of the right quality or something, we would understand. But I think we just said 3 on a rolling basis, and let's see how year 1 goes and go from there.
Yeah.
3. Apologies.
Everybody happy with that? Yes. Good. Okay. Thank you. Extension of the shared monitoring officer role. Now, is that Mr. Ramtal or is that Louise?
It's actually me because it's about Mr. Ramtahol. But again, he obviously he can comment. Obviously, and I appreciate he's undertaking the role. But it's just the role really is coming back to you as the employment committee. We put in a trial and we said that we would come back after 6 months. So we are coming back to ask that we continue with the current arrangements, but it should be noted some of the points that we have raised just with regards to some of the difficulties that we've had with recruiting our own legal staff and the pressures that might put on the department. It's not to say that the agreement isn't running well, and also obviously we are checking with Elmbridge because obviously the agreement is on both sides, but also just to reconfirm that on a monthly basis this arrangement could be terminated by either side. So again, it's just sort of making sure that we're reporting back to you that it's running well. We'd like to continue. There are some pressures, and again, if there's any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Malvaganam.
Thank you, Chair. One question I have for the monitoring officer and the officer Ramathol is that I know it's a great thing you are doing in terms of trying to balance your life. And are you employing any temporary staff for the lack of support you have within Surrey Heath, or is Elmbridge actually employing extra staff for the missing gaps?
So, Chair, if I could come in, if that's okay.
Please do.
The problem fundamentally has been caused by not being able to fill vacant posts within the legal team. So, in particular, a property solicitor post has been vacant since November. So, part of the original business case, if you like, for the shared role was for myself to be able to delegate some of the MO functions to principal lawyers. Now, whilst there are posts in the team that are not filled, that it's not possible to achieve. So there is a short-term issue there in terms of resources and me not being able to delegate some of the MO functions to principal lawyers. But assuming I can fill the vacant posts, then I don't envisage it continuing to be a problem. But the flexibility to terminate the agreement on 1 month's notice is helpful if we feel that we get to a point where it's not sustainable because these difficulties are problematic. So one thing I've got very firmly in my mind is the onshoring of the JPERT, and then there'll be a requirement to recruit another property lawyer. So obviously if these problems persist, then they're obviously going to be compounded by the onshoring of the JPERT. So it's something I need to keep an eye on. And I am working with HR closely to see if we can sort of look at the recruitment strategy and improve that and make that more attractive for applicants. But I have got a temporary lawyer starting in April for 6 months to help us whilst we go through another recruitment exercise. So if that's helpful to you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
It's a straight finance question, really. Is the temporary lawyer more or less expensive than the return that we get from sharing you with another council?
Again, Chair, would you like me to,
please, yes,
to come in on that? The temporary lawyer is being funded by the savings from having the vacant post for a period of time and not being able to fill that post. So that post has been vacant from November, and the 6 months post is also partially funded by the fact that I have reduced the team by 1 principal lawyer in order to make our senior legal officer permanent. So there was a slight reduction in salary there, combined with the savings from the vacant post, gives me a budget to be able to fund this temporary post for 6 months. So I've been in discussion with Martin about that and Adrian. So the figures stack up for a 6 month period. So the business case is not it's not related to the financial situation with Elmbridge and whether that sort of stacks up.
Thank you. Councillor Bates.
Thank you. In the event of this being passed tonight, obviously I don't have a vote. When you have another review, which I'm guessing will be in 6 months, Can I suggest that there may be an exempt paper attached to it with those figures that have just been mentioned? Because it does strike me that members also need to be reassured about that. We can see the wider partnership benefits of that, and that's great. And I think the idea was it would save some money, and obviously things have not worked out as initially intended. But obviously this does need to be regularly reviewed. So I would perhaps suggest that an exempt paper is attached next time, just to clarify that.
Thank you. Councillor Mulvagon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add something to the monitoring officer and to the CEO here. I mean, JPUT is coming on from 1st of April. That is we'll be making significant amount of savings on it, and I don't think my sort of request is that we don't lose that saving in employing temporary lawyers. So yeah, maybe you guys should, the officers should consider upping the salary a bit to attract the right candidate. It's something for you all to consider. I'm just throwing that in for you all to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any points? Are we happy that this arrangement should carry on? Yes. Yes. Good. Thank you very much. Can we come back then in 6 months' time with actual, cost benefit figures? Yeah. Thank you. Urgent action. And the urgent action is?
So, Chair, this is an item that came to the committee for sign-off regarding the appointment and the change from the executive head of regulatory to a head of planning. We asked you to sign this off as we needed to move forward with the recruitment as quickly as possible due to a retirement that we have, and obviously it's a very key post. So hence the reason we couldn't wait for this meeting, but it's just then reporting that back to you and to this committee and asking that we advise the executive of this.
Yes, thank you. It was sent round a few weeks ago, was it not? Yes. And there were no objections. No. Appointment subcommittee minutes. To agree the minutes of the appointment subcommittee meeting held on 30th of September, 12th of October, 19th of October and 17th of February. And to ask the chairman of this meeting to sign the minutes. Is this meeting or that meeting?
This meeting, Chair.
This meeting. Okay, so I will sign them gladly if I could. Does anybody have any comments about those minutes? No? So I think we can take it that I will sign them whenever possible. Thank you. Work programme.
So, Chair, to present the forward programme for the coming year. Again, reviewing policies that we have ongoing. So, again, if there's any questions that want to be raised.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I've got a query. The climate change policy, if I could, is that a...
That's a clumsy way that has been perhaps put forward. This is any HR policies that are related to the action plan that has come from the climate change policy, okay. That we need to make updates to for our staff.
So that will sit with HR. So I just wonder if maybe we could bring that forward to the July meeting and move the pay policy statement to the October meeting, or alternatively bring forward the sickness, flexible working and health and safety to the July if that can't be. It's just that they seem to fall much more readily together to have the pay policy statement in with those other policies that relate directly to HR. So that was my, it seems a bit odd to look at them in isolation of one another, that's all.
Can I just come back,
yes,
Chair, if that's okay? It's just with the pay policy statement, and the reason we have it in July is that is the first time after the pay negotiations have been completed that we can actually update that statement, and it's something we need to publish, and we need to make sure that it's up to date. But with regard to, if you want me to move the climate change options, we can look at bringing those forward, if that would be an agree. I mean, I'm sure that's not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair.
You're muted, Grab. Your space bar is not working.
Ah, how's that?
Better.
Ah, there we go. Don't know why the space bar sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, but there we go anyway. Just a slight correction to the initial page, the list of meetings. I think I did make that mention in the joint staff meeting or whatever it was. 24th of March 2021, should that be 2022?
Yes, on the first page.
Yeah, right at the top.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Sorry, Chair, can I just check, have we resolved to move the climate change policy to the 8th of July? It's been muted, but we don't, is that what we're doing, if it's not a problem? Or are we leaving where it is? I mean, given it's one of our strategic objectives. Councillor Galliford, I'm surprised you've not said anything. But yeah, just to make sure that we do bring it forward. I just are we moving it or not? Because we haven't actually made that decision.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be a problem, so it can be moved. Yeah.
Can I just add, Chair, that we will obviously be a bit more specific about those items and just make sure they're specific to the action plan and what we've been asked to do in the action plan. So when we bring that forward in July, I will make sure that it has been tallied up and answers that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Which I think takes us to the end of the public session. We now have to resolve to, under section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Act and set out below. Items 14 and 15, HR matters. Are we resolved to do this? Yes. Thank you. So I guess now we turn off the
Live stream.
live stream.
Am I right in saying that you will be doing another Zoom meeting now? Is that correct? Or am I just, so I think everyone can just leave this meeting and I'll stop the live stream anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I'll stop it anyway. Let me stop the